Hi guys, Sugri here with a new video, and this video will be a video that helps people know and see what they could choose as alts and mains going into Dragonflight. I've made a video about the best classes to main or alt or just skip going into Dragonflight, but this video is more about a general video on how you can choose your alts and mains. And a lot of people are actually realizing that in Dragonflight you will be able to alt without any problems. I think everyone will be fully honor geared by season 1 and maybe 2 or 3 characters. And I feel like it's going to be a glorious PvP expansion because you will be able to play any spec, any class without any problems, because honor gear, PvP gear, conquest gear, whatever gear you can have is quite easy and quite fast to get. Now, I'm going to help you with that. You can choose your alts and your mains based on this concepts on how many characters you're going to play. If you want to play 3 or 4 characters, it depends a bit on how you can perceive. Depends also about the game time. If you have a lot of time to actually main like characters that are a bit more complex, then you can just throw a bit more complexity towards that set of 4-5 characters that you can play in Dragonflight. If you want to play only 2 characters, then you can just take 2 opposites to actually freshen the things up for yourself, like the Dragonflight expansion and experience for arenas and PvP. You want to make it as fresh as possible, and this will be helpful. But before we start, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. Like the video if you like that format of video, and please comment below what you think about the video. Did it help? Did it make you actually choose an alt or main? Let me know and I'll be glad to discuss it with you. Now, I'm going to discuss it. It's on a tier list maker, but it's not a tier list, guys. I just try to find a way to show it graphically what I'm meaning about alts and mains. Now, you have melee primary, you have melee support, you have ranged primary, ranged support, healers, which have subcategories, but I'm not going to start with that. And then you have the specialists, which is basically survivor hunter, feral druid, and subtlety rogues. I'm going to discuss about that. My own pattern, if I had to choose 4 characters, would be 1 melee, 1 ranged, 1 healer, and 1 flex, where I see, look, if I want to have a 4th character, I can play a 2nd melee, I can play a 2nd healer, I can play whatever else I would like to play. But at least with that pattern, I always keep it fresh for myself. I have different comps I can play in 2v2, in 3v3, and in RBGs. I could also give myself like one character is more focused about RBGs, one spec or one character is more focused around solo shuffle, and my other characters are more focused for 3v3 or 2v2 with my arena partners. And that would be like my pattern that I would create for myself. Now, I think I'm going to main 6 characters in Dragonflight. Like, of course, you have like 3 that are going to be my mains, and the 3 other ones are going to be more specific towards specific PvP content, right? But now let's start with the idea. If you are looking for a big melee that you want to play in multiple comps, I would suggest you see in the melee primary section. I've put Assassination Rogue and Outlaw Rogue in my melee primary section because I feel like they are more like rush down classes. They are going to rush down the enemy team by CC or with damage or with constant pressure, with consistent damage or burst damage. And I feel like they deserve more the melee primary spot, while for example specialists, the subtlety rogue is more of a specialist. You really want to main that character and put more effort into that character to be performing. The same for feral druids. It's very complex to play, a very fun class, but not everyone, very fun spec, but not everyone can play that, and that's why it is a specialist. And often than not, if you have to choose 4 characters and you take one of those specialists, it should be your top 1 or top 2 second, like your first or second most played characters. Because I think if you play survival, it's not really as transposable, like on the level of skill, than let's say Arms Warrior or Fury Warrior. The skill sets that you learn with survival is not going to go towards another spec because it's not comparable. Same for feral druids, because shapeshifting is a big thing. Off healing, cyclones, doing a lot of bleeds, like run away and then go in whenever you have the burst. That's something not every class has that. Like for example, even Windwalker doesn't have that. And a Sublety Rogue, again, the way you are going to play a Sublety Rogue is very setupy, and again, it's not really transposable with, let's say, another spec. Of course, Windwalker are very similar with a Solity Rogue, but it's still different because as Windwalker, they can use their TPs, they have also a lot more defensives compared to a Solity Rogue, and in general, you don't need to actually see and look for a re-stealth, while a Solity Rogue might just look for that. And now I'm going to explain the range primary, the range support, and then we can talk about like the set of alts mains you're going to actually choose for yourself. Of course, you can do whatever you want, but this is a sort pattern that you can make it for yourself on an Excel sheet or a Word document, and you can really go in depth and have fun with it, because theory crafting is by themselves very fun. Now, range primary is more or less you have a primary DPS, a primary caster. In 3v3, often you try to you put either two primaries or one primary with one range support. So, for example, Shadowplay, which is Affliction Warlock or Demonology Warlock or Destruction Warlock with a Shadow Priest. You have a Shadow Priest which is now doing a lot of damage, but it's still seen as a support because you have a lot of utility, a lot of CDs, a lot of CCs, and an Affliction Warlock which has insane pressure, and by themselves they can kill the enemy team, but it needs a bit more support, and that's why you need the Shadow Priest or the Elemental Shaman, like LSD, like the comp LSD or LSX, so any other healer is basically an Affliction Warlock or Destruction Warlock or Demonology Warlock, basically carrying the team, but the Elemental Shaman and the Shadow Priest actually enabling them to actually carry. And then you have like mage lock comps, so you can have like an Affliction Warlock with a Frost Mage, for example, or Destruction Warlock with a Fire Mage or with a Frost Mage, a lot of combinations, or even with an Arcane Mage. And that by itself you have two primaries, but two primaries that they play for themselves. They try to like really help them with the CC that they have, like fears, polymorphs, slows from the Frost Mage, or even the Arcane Mage, or the burstiness from Fire Mage that actually converge towards focusing them instead of the Warlock. And the same, an Affliction Warlock that is like left alone is going to do insane amounts of damages, and that comp is also working. And then you have also, like for example, an MM Hunter that can play with a melee support, like for example a Retribution Paladin. So you can have Cupid, which is working because of the Retribution Paladin. MM Hunters by themselves, they are doing insane amount of damages, but they need to actually have some sort of peel. And then you have also some comps that plays with a MM Hunter, which is a primary ranged DPS, and also a melee primary, which is an Arms Warrior or a Fury Warrior. If you play KFC, which is basically Hunter with a Warrior and then with a healer, your MM Hunter is still the primary DPS because it still needs a lot of love to actually do a lot of damage, because they will just get focused down by the enemy team. And then you have your Arms Warrior that plays more of the support, so they try really hard to help the MM Hunter actually to do damage. They still have melee primary damage dealing abilities, I would say, but they do get a sub role where they could play as a support. And the same for Frost Decay and Unholy Decay. They are melee supports that can actually do a lot of damage by themselves, but it is ideally like paired with either a ranged primary, like let's say Unholy Decay with an Affliction Warlock, or a double support like with, for example, Shadow Priest with an Unholy Decay, which is also possible playing with two supports, but they need to have some sort of like conversion of energies with themselves to actually do a lot of damage. Or you have like, let's say, a melee support like for example Unholy Decay or Frost Decay playing TSG with a warrior, or playing hero comp with, let's say, a DH. A DH can play with anyone to actually be successful. He can play with a hunter, they can play with a feral, which is Ebola, you can play with a caster, which is with an Affliction Warlock, or with a Shadow Priest. You have a lot of options. Now I discussed about that. Now go into what you can main or alt going into Dragonflight. So let's say you are willing to main warrior. Basically you will have Fury Warrior and Arms Warrior. They are just one class. You will be able to play Fury, you will be able to play Arms. and you can choose whatever you are going to play. That by themselves is one character. Of course, you can play two specs, but it is one character because it doesn't feel different. And then you can choose a ranged DPS. A ranged DPS could be high maintenance, which is a primary DPS, or you can go for low maintenance range support, which is, for example, an elemental shaman or a shadow priest, which is not super mechanically very intense. It is more about CC, CDs, and doing whatever you can at the right time. And let's say you're playing a warrior, you can definitely play a elemental shaman. And with playing an elemental shaman, you do get an enhancement shaman in the package, because if you can play elemental shaman and you're gearing towards enhancement shaman, you have like one character with two great specs that you can play, and that by themselves is already a win. You can just say, look, I'm going to call the day. I have a warrior and I have elemental shaman, enhancement shaman, and maybe resto shaman if you want to heal sometimes, and that's good. But I would say you can always pick another character with it, because you have a lot of time, I would say, to gear up a third character, and that third character would be a healer. So you have resto shaman as a healer, maybe because you are willing to main elemental shaman but you want to tip your toes into resto shaman. But the healer that you really want to play is, let's say, a disc priest, and there you go. You have like a warrior, you have a shaman, and you have a priest, and basically those three classes are going to be plenty going to Dragonflight. So if you want to main three characters, you're going to have a great time by choosing first your primary, if you want to do a melee primary or a ranged primary, and then go for a support-ish character, like say an elemental shaman or an enhancement shaman, or even a DK, for example. You can also play in DK if you want, but I always try to find characters that can play different comps. Let's say a warrior. If you play warrior, most likely you're going to play either with a DH, with a retribution paladin, or with a DK. So if you take a DK, you kinda are locked into the same comps, playing with a DH, playing with a warrior, or sometimes you can play with a caster. But I would personally play with a melee. But if you pick an elemental shaman, you open the door towards LSD, towards, let's say, different comps. Evoker with a shaman will be good. So you have a lot of like ways to have great performance comps available to you. And you have enhancement shaman if you really want to play turbo, and you play turbo, no problem. You have an enhancement shaman at your disposal. You have also resto shaman if you really want to play with it. And the same for disc priest. Your disc priest will be able to play with nearly all the comps, and that makes it a lot of fun, because you will not be stuck in LFG trying to find teammates, or even in solo shuffle you will be able to be very flexible, because you will be able to play with every class, every spec. And that's pretty much what I'm trying to say. If you want to find a great alt main, I would say main or alt, going into Dragonflight, you just need to try to find it this way, I would say, because it's quite easy, and it is also quite fun to have some imagination and see which classes you want to pair up to have a lot of fresh experiences going into Dragonflight. But let's say you wanna main an affliction warlock like me. So I'm a main affliction warlock. I will dip my toes into demonology, and I will likely play 45% of my time destruction warlock, because I do love destruction warlock. Those three specs into one character is already a fantastic combination, although the comps are quite similar. And that's why I'm going to play all my time, or like nearly all my time, with a warlock. And what I'm going to do is probably going to main a DK, because I like to have a melee and I don't want to spend too much time learning characters. I want to play DK, since really it's playing a bit of the same way. Like Unholy DKs plays the same way as an Affliction Warlock. And Frost DK, they can do pretty much like a warrior, and warriors are also classes that I play in general. But you have your melee support, you have your ranged primary, and now you can dip your toes into, let's say, a healer. And which healer I'm likely going to main in Dragonflight? It will be Disc Priest. And Disc Priest is a fantastic spec that can also be played. You can play also Shadow Priest whenever you play Priest. So you have also some doors open if you want to dip your toes into ranged support. You have a lot of ways to actually have fun with that class. And just having a primary range DPS, a support melee, which could be a melee primary on some comps, but you have a support melee that is going to be very good into different comps, and then you have a healer, which is going to be fantastic for solo shuffle if you want to have instant queues, or if you want to have fun with the different comps in twos or in threes. And then you have your flex, and your flex could be, let's say, something you really want to play because you do just enjoy to play that class. And for me, my flex would be warrior because I do play a lot of warrior, and those four classes are already fantastic going into Dragonflight. Now, me myself, I'm going to play 5 or 6 classes, so I do plan on playing shaman as well because shaman is going to be insanely fun. But this is the idea for someone that wants to play only 4 classes, or if you want to play only 3 classes, you have like the idea is still the same. You want to have one primary, or if you have a lot of time, go for 2 primaries, and then go for a support character, a support class that doesn't need too much maintenance, and then you can go for a healer, so you can play with your mates and they can play with their DPSs, and you can just heal them when they are going for their DPS instead of their healers. So it gives you more option to actually enjoy the game. And now we can give you an example. I'm going to give you an example because a lot of people will still ask about it. Let's say you want to main Feral Druid, and Feral Druid is not the easiest class to play, and for sure deserves a primary spot, and that's why it is your primary spot. Like, Feral Druid is really the class that you should have high maintenance on, because the more you will play, the better you will be, especially for solo shuffle, but also for threes with jungle, for example, or in twos if you want to play with a healer, or double DPS comps, which are very good going into Dragonflight, by the way. You have your Feral Druid, and now I would suggest, since you will put enough energy into Feral, I would put like 2 melee support, either 2 melee supports or 2 range supports, or you go for a combination of both. So I would, let's say, choose. I don't see Balance Druid here. Balance Druid is here. My bad. Balance Druid is also a range support, by the way. It's not a primary DPS. So you can choose either a range support and a melee support, or you can do 2 of melees or 2 of range. You can do whatever you want. I would suggest to, for example, play Shadow Priest, so you can also combine it with Disc Priest. So you have a healer and you have also a range DPS. The Feral Druid you can also combine it with Resto Druid, by the way. But let's say because Resto Druid is also very high maintenance, you really have to play a lot of Resto Druid to be very good on it. You have Feral Druid, then your Shadow Priest that can also play Disc Priest, and I would then suggest a melee support would be Retribution Paladin, for example. Or you can play another specialist if you want to play Feral Druid. Often than not, you play with a Hunter, and you know what a Hunter can do, so you can play a Survival Hunter instead of a Retribution Paladin. So you have 2 high maintenance characters and 1 class that you need to play, like, for, let's say, a Priest. You can have a great time. Like, let's say Shadow Priest with a Disc Priest is going to be enough and plenty of experience going into Dragonflight, because it has a lot more comps going in to Dragonflight. The only problem you have with Feral Druids, I would say with Survival Hunter, because in Feral Druids have comps, but it's just the most performing comp is jungle. But Survival Hunter, often than not, you can play Cupid, but it's not as good as Hunter, for example. And you can play, let's say, KFC, but then it's not the same as BM Hunter, because you need to be kiting a lot. And as Survival Hunter, kiting does mean also a bit less damage. You have damage, but now that Mongoose Bite is like a primary build, often than not, you can't really stay too much melee versus, let's say, a lot of comps. So your main comp will be jungle. You will not really know anything else going into Dragonflight. But in twos, you will be king. A lot of people still think that hunters are going to be king in twos because they are clearly not changed since Shadowlands. Even in BFA, they were very good. So I think that combination of classes could be very good for you guys if, of course, you are interested in this pattern. So this marks kind of the end of the video. I wanted to discuss how my train of thought is about melees and alts. I wanted to help like most people choosing their alts and choosing their mains. I'm not going to choose your main or your alt because, again, I can't know what you like to play. But a lot of people are asking me, what can I play? I'm main warrior, but I need an alt, and we don't know what I can play. Basically, this pattern will help you, because if you main an arms warrior, for example, I would say a support melee or support range is the best option. I would say retribution paladin is quite nice if you are maining arms, because you do know what needs to be done to be good as a retribution paladin. Same for enhancement shaman, turbo. I mean, as an arms warrior, most likely you will play with an enhancement shaman and you will have great success, and you will know how to play enhancement shaman going into Dragonflight. And the same for range support. If you're playing elemental shaman, you know you have thunder under your sleeve. If you really want to play like a warrior comp, you can play elemental shaman and know the other part of that comp. And I think just with that pattern, you will just have more ideas, I would say, choosing alts, choosing mains. You should also know that some classes just need more maintenance than others. Like, for example, Warlock, I would not combine it with a mage, because it's both high maintenance classes. They will need you to actually perform and play a lot of that class. And that's why you don't see a lot of Warlock mains going mage in pro scene, for example. They are often a warlock main, and then you have a mage main as a sub or as a second player for example, mage lock comps. And yeah, I mean, you will have to see and test for yourself, but I feel like with this idea, you could already start to explore options. And trust me, Dragonflight is a very alt friendly friendly expansion, and you will have a lot of fun exploring options. Again, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. If this helps you in any way, please like the video, but also comment below what you think about the video. And if you chose your main or alt, I'm very interested in your choice. Again, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. I will catch you in a next video. Have a great day. Bye.